Are the Las Vegas Raiders good enough on the offensive line to where the Raiders can actually have success this season? More than that, can the Raiders' offensive line actually have dominant games? This is a question that somebody asked me on Twitter, and I kind of want to just get into it. The question I was asked is, do you think the Raiders' offensive line is good enough this year, given that Geno Smith has struggled while he had a bad offensive line? Plus, there's obviously some, uncertainties around the offensive line. Just kind of my thoughts and opinions on that. I want to talk about this. Plus, we got a Christian Wilkins update that came out. Another image kind of came out, some bad news. But on the other side, the Raiders got rewarded and I shouldn't even say reward, but one of the big agencies out there, the news media companies, whatever you want to call it, they called the Raiders one of the winners of the offseason. And they said some things that kind of got me thinking about Pete Carroll versus John Spytek and how these guys kind of have different approaches, which I kind of want to get into this video as well. But first, let's start right away. Let's talk about this offensive line. So the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line, it's kind of revamped. And this offensive line is obviously a lot different than where we were just like 2 years ago. And truth be told, if you guys really think about this, I know some people wouldn't agree with this, because I know a lot of people had the opposite opinion of me while I was stating my opinion over the past 2 years. Over the past 2 years, I said the Raiders' offensive line is awful, right? I've said that very, very clear about it. I said I think we're one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. I stick with it, and I think we have been over the past 2 years. I mean, if you really think about just last year as an example, we had Cody Whitehair as our starting guard. Like, Cody Whitehair is a terrible guard. Like, to me, that made absolutely no sense why the Raiders said we're going to sign this guy, and he's going to be one of our starting guards. But it wasn't just Cody Whitehair. If you look at some of what else the Raiders had going into last year, Darren Munford was the expected starting tackle for the Raiders. To me, that's terrible. More than that, Andre James really had kind of fallen off. He really didn't develop. And those are three expected starters for the Raiders kind of going into camp last year. And the year before that, those three guys mostly played for us as well. So to me, the Las Vegas Raiders were really, really, really bad on the offensive line, but that's not the case this year. In fact, I think the Raiders' offensive line this year could be a top 10 unit if everything kind of goes to, what the plan is for the Raiders at this point. And I kind of want to talk about the plan as well. So right now, the Raiders have Cole Miller as their starting left tackle. We don't know if he'll get a contract. And if he doesn't get a contract, if he'll hold out, we don't really know, right? But we're going to find that out over the next, 2 months or so. Will Cole Miller actually be the starting tackle for the Raiders? Will he get his new contract? Will he hold out? That's something that'll be answered within the next 2 months. But, Cole Miller is the expected starter. And to me, he's a top 10 overall offensive tackle in the NFL. Now, he isn't Penei Sewell, right? Penei Sewell is, when it comes to run blocking, he's dominant. When it comes to pass blocking, he's dominant. Penei Sewell is, an elite offensive tackle. And Colt Miller isn't that. But Colt Miller, I would argue, is a really, really, really good run blocking tackle. Arguably, you can make the argument he's an elite run blocker at the tackle position. You can make that argument that Colt Miller is one of the top 2 or 3 run blocking tackles in the NFL. And you see that across the tape. Power, zone, outside, wide, inside zone, does not matter. Colt Miller is a really, really good run blocker. And he's actually physically dominant as well when it comes to run blocking, down blocking, and those type of things as well. And he's, pass blocking, he kind of needs some work, but he is what he is at this point. As a pass blocker, he is still, to me, a top 10 tackle. Subjective, of course, you could say he's not top 10 and said he's top 15, whatever it is, what it is. He's one of the best tackles in the NFL. And then you get to the left guard position, and I think Dylan Parham's another guy where, I think Dylan Parham's better than what people say. He isn't by any means like a top tier guard. He's not physically dominant, at least he hasn't shown that. But Dylan Parham still, to me, has a ton of upside. One of the guys that Dylan Parham kind of reminds me of, 2 guys specifically, former Raiders. One was Lester Cotton, who the Raiders drafted, or he was an undrafted guy, came to the Raiders. The other was John Simpson, who was a 4th round pick for the Raiders. Both guys stuck around with the Raiders, 2, 3, 4 years, and the Raiders ultimately released them. But both guys are still in the NFL. Lester Cotton's been in the NFL for like 6, 7 seasons at this point. John Simpson, maybe a year less than that, right? 5, 6 seasons. Both guys have just kind of slowly developed, and both guys have kind of found their way in the NFL. I believe John Simpson was starting for the Ravens last year. I think he got himself a pretty nice contract this offseason. Don't quote me on that, but He's an expected starter going into this season. Lester Cotton started a ton over the past 2 seasons for the Dolphins. I'm not 100% sure if he's still in the league going into this year. He probably is on some roster out there. But Dylan Parham kind of reminds me of those two guys where, he's been here with the Raiders for 3 years now. I think he's kind of gotten better and better and better. Year 3 wasn't great, but we're about to go into a year 4 where I think, he's going back to the left guard position as well. I think Dylan Parham could actually be good for the Raiders this year. I think as we continue to go forward, Dylan Parham could actually become the guy we think he was supposed to be. Plus, I think this scheme and system fits Parham really, really well. And then I also think he's better at left guard than he was at right guard, right? Last year he went back over to right guard, which he was a right guard, right tackle in college. Came into the NFL, played left guard for 2 years before they switched him over to right guard. 4th year, he's going back to left guard, and I think that makes sense. I think he was a lot better at left guard. So, to me, when I look at Colt Miller, I look at Dylan Parham, these guys are guys that I think could be good, productive football players. Then you get to Jackson Powers-Johnson. I think he's one of the top 2 or 3 centers in the NFL. And I don't say that just talking out of my ass. People always say, how can you say he's a top 2 or 3 center when he's only played center for like 8-9 games? You can see a whole lot from a guy in 8 or 9 starts. Like, it's pretty clear if you guys put the tape on that Jackson Powers-Johnson is elite. Like, people say, hey, Tyler Linderbaum's a top 5 center. There's no comparison between Jackson Powers-Johnson and Tyler Linderbaum. Linderbaum's very similar to Andre James, where if you're a stronger defensive tackle, they can kind of beat up on Tyler Linderbaum. But people still say he's a top 5 center. There's no guy that's going to beat up on Jackson Powers-Johnson. The guy's elite, right? He's strong as hell. He's physical as hell. And he has elite technique. I think Jackson Powers-Johnson is arguably going to be the Raiders' best offensive player in this next season. I think he's elite. So that's what you have. Left guard, left tackle, left guard, center. You have guys that are good football players. Right guard, I think, is the one question mark, right? You have Alex Kappa, who we don't know what he's going to be. Is he going to return back to form? Based on his tape, I'm not a huge fan of him. But at the same time, you have his replacement in Caleb Rogers, who you took in the 3rd round. So to me, the Raiders should be okay with Caleb Rogers as he kind of gets into that position. He develops, and long term, he should be the starter for the Raiders at right guard. And then at right tackle, you have some mixture of DJ Glaze, Charles Grant. I think it'll probably be DJ Glaze. Truth be told, some people think I'm too critical of DJ Glaze. When it was Thayer Munford, I was super critical because I had no faith that Thayer Munford was a starting caliber tackle. That's not the case with DJ Glaze. In fact, I think there's a chance DJ Glaze ends up starting for the Raiders, and he ends up being a good offensive tackle. Now, I'm not sold on him yet, but I still think there's things there that make me feel like he'll actually be a starting franchise caliber tackle. But we'll see if he can develop into that this year. So when you look at the offensive line from left tackle to right tackle, the Raiders have real pieces in place that could actually make us a top 10 unit. Now, this year, I'd say we'll probably be a top 15 unit, given we were a bottom 5 unit just in the last 2 years, right? I'd argue we were one of the worst offensive lines last year and even the year before that. But as we go forward, the Raiders' offensive line, it's kind of been revamped. It's been reworked. Guys are developing going into year 2. It should be a lot better this year, and I think it'll be even better next year. And we'll see if DJ Glaze can hopefully develop into that franchise guy. But the question I was asked is the offensive line good enough? Is Geno Smith going to feel protected by this group? I think we will be. I think he will absolutely be protected. When I think about the Raiders' offense and kind of what we brought into this offense, I think the Raiders are going to be really, really good. And this actually just kind of takes me to the next article I want to get into. Mike Jones here, who is a writer for The Athletic, right? This guy puts information out there for The Athletic. He's one of the not team reporters, but he's like, NFL reporter. He kind of covers all 32 teams. Mike Jones basically had 5 teams that he said were the 2025 offseason winners. And the Raiders were one of the teams. And I want to share with you guys some of what this guy said because it kind of just gets into the general point of the Raiders offense and kind of how they've revamped everything. He said the Eagles were winners, the Vikings were winners, and then he also went on to say the Patriots was another team that won, the Bears, and then, of course, finally the Las Vegas Raiders. So way down here, you got the Las Vegas Raiders as another team that is essentially a winner. And he puts it out there. One of the reasons why he thinks the Raiders won was basically Tom Brady was able to lure a highly regarded talent evaluator in John Spytek. He thinks that was one of the reasons why the Las Vegas Raiders were winners. He also put this report out, which I don't know if it's true, but he said the Raiders wanted Liam Cohen to be their head coach over Pete Carroll, but they ended up wound up with Pete Carroll. So I don't know if that's 100% true that we wanted Cohen over Pete Carroll, but that's what Mike Jones is saying. He is a pretty widely respected insider, NFL insider, I should say. But this guy's basically saying that one of the main reasons why the Raiders won this offseason was because they were essentially able to bring in John Spytek, Tom Brady specifically. And John Spytek was a guy for over the last year or so, teams wanted John Spytek. Like, teams were reaching out saying, is John Spytek looking to become a general manager? And at that time, he was not. And when the Raiders reached out, Tom Brady specifically, he took our job. Like, he did not have to. And he could have had other jobs if he really, really wanted to. It was kind of like, I think it was Adam Peters, who was the guy with the 49ers, ended up with the Commanders. He was another guy that teams really, really, really wanted. But one of the reasons why Mike Jones thinks the Raiders were winners was because of John Spytek. And that kind of leads into what I was saying, talking about the offensive line. John Spytek's come here, and he's drafted 2 guards for the Raiders. Those 2 guards are expected, I should say 1 guard, 1 tackle. But those 2 guys are expected to start for the Raiders as we kind of go forward. Caleb Rogers might start as soon as, right away. But more than that, the Raiders are getting national recognition for being a team that's basically a winner this offseason. More than just the fact that Tom Brady was able to help get John Spytek here. This guy also said, basically trading for Geno Smith solved the long-running need for stability at that position. Then they landed a potential difference maker in Ashton Jeanty. Those 2 things, John Spytek was basically able to help facilitate. You bring in a guy like Geno Smith, obviously Pete Carroll had the connection. But then in the draft, you bring in Ashton Jeanty. And you think about where the Raiders were just 2 years ago. Think how bad this offense was last year and even the year before that. From the offensive line to the guys that were the playmakers on this team, right? And I know we had Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams was always kind of on that downward trend as the Raiders kind of traded and brought him over. Yes, he was still really, really, really good, but he was already kind of on that downward trend, right? Ashton Jeanty is literally about to be a rookie, very first year in the NFL. And this guy, based off the potential and upside, and even some of the reports that are coming out of OTAs, this guy is supposed to be the next great running back in the NFL, right? And I do think he'll end up being a really, really, really good football player. But just, keeping in mind, just 2 years ago, the Raiders did not have the league's best running back or a guy with that type of potential, right? Last year, we had Zamir White, right? And that was our guy last year. And now we have Ashton Jeanty, and then we have Brock Bowers, who's another guy, right? We didn't have him 2 years ago, but we got him last year. Look at how much better the Raiders' offense is. Jacoby Myers was arguably our best player last year on offense, and he's now going to be the 3rd best player on this offense. And that's assuming Dante Thornton doesn't develop and get, become better than Jacoby Myers. I'm not saying that because I think Jacoby Myers is a bad player, but the reports coming out of camp, right? Jackson Powers Johnson talked about Thornton, Pete Carroll's talked about Thornton, Maxx Crosby's talking about Thornton. These guys are saying that Thornton looks like the real deal, essentially, right? And again, I know there's no pads right now, but sometimes when you watch a guy, you just know that, hey, this guy's different, right? And that's what people are saying right now of Dante Thornton. Again, he might not be better than Jacoby, but let's just say he is as well. Look at how much better the Raiders' offense is, and that doesn't include the fact that we have an actual quarterback this year. We haven't had a quarterback in 3 or 4 years, right? So we actually have a quarterback. We have a good run game. We've revamped the offensive line. We have weapons for a quarterback. For The Athletic to basically say the Las Vegas Raiders are winners of the offseason, I agree with them 100%. The Raiders this year are winners, and I think as we kind of go forward, the Raiders are going to prove themselves as that team, right? But this also takes me to another interesting point that I think we have to talk about. This is going to be the difference between Pete Carroll's mindset and John Spytek's mindset. I understand the Raiders are essentially winners, but I also think, there is a chance the Raiders wanted Liam Cohen instead of Pete Carroll. I think a big factor could have been essentially Pete Carroll's age. Pete Carroll's going to be a coach for most likely 4 more seasons, and then he'll retire at that point. And the 4th season is actually optional, so I don't know which person makes that decision. I don't know if it's John Spytek that makes that decision or if it's Mark Davis or some other front office member. But Pete Carroll's contract, as it's described, is a 3-year contract with the 4th-year team option. After those 4 years, Pete Carroll's not going to coach. He's most likely going to retire, and someone else is going to take over. And what that means is Pete Carroll wants to win a Super Bowl, right? He wants his legacy to be that, hey, I went, last couple of years on a high note, I end up winning that Super Bowl, and then I retire with the Super Bowl. And that's Pete Carroll's mindset, essentially, right? He wants to win a Super Bowl. And I say that because, John Spytek's mindset's different. Yes, John Spytek wants to win a Super Bowl, but John Spytek will tell you guys himself it's a lot more important to him to be conservative and make the smart decisions, as opposed to saying we're going to go all in, 100%, we have $40 million in cap left, we're not carrying it over, we're going to spend it all in 2025. John Spytek is not going to do that, which again takes you back to the mindset, right? John Spytek and Pete Carroll have different mindsets. Pete Carroll wants to spend that $40 million to get Jalen Ramsey, to get Jermaine Pratt, to get whichever defensive or offensive player it is to win us that Super Bowl. Even if that means that for the future years we have less cap. And maybe we even borrow money and bring money into this year. Right? You think about what Tom Brady and the New England Patriots did back in 2016 through like 2019 before Tom Brady left. The Patriots said, hey, Brady's coming to an end. We have a couple years left. Let's get into cap hell in future years to make these years great. And they won 2 Super Bowls because of it. They borrowed a ton of cap. I hit them hard on the other side of that, but for the years that Brady kind of finished with the Patriots, they won Super Bowls. And then the Saints kind of did the same thing with Drew Brees, right? They said, hey, Brees is coming to an end. Let's go all in and try to win that Super Bowl. And they continue to do it, right? Even with Derek Carr, they're trying to win a Super Bowl. They kind of went all in. Didn't really work out. We've seen teams do this over the years where they kind of go all in. They spend a ton of money in, like 1 year, 2 year, let's try winning that Super Bowl. Some teams it works out, some teams it doesn't. But John Spytek's not that type of guy. He is not trying to go all in to try to win the Super Bowl. Pete Carroll might, but John Spytek is not, right? John Spytek understands being conservative is how you have long-term success. You look at Howie Roseman as an example. The guy's not going to overpay Milton Williams. He's going to let him walk. And over the years, he's done this so many different times, where he's basically let these guys walk. Isaac Samalo was a guy who got like $15 million from the Pittsburgh Steelers like 4 years ago. Samalo was considered one of the best guards in the NFL. And Roseman let him walk. Not that he wanted to, but, sometimes you got to just make the smart decisions, the financially sound decisions. You had Jason Peters, a Hall of Fame offensive tackle. At some point, you had to make that tough decision to cut him, to maybe keep another guy in Lane Johnson, and then say, hey, we're going to roll forward with this other guy, right? But my point in saying all that is John Spytek is going to be conservative because long-term being conservative and making sure you draft well, right, is the plan to have long-term success. It's the only way in the NFL to have long-term success. It oftentimes does not work if you go into the other way, right? And again, I say all this because, the Raiders, if Pete Carroll wants this team to be a Super Bowl team, they're going to spend that money. And even if they don't, we're still going to be competing for the Super Bowl in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think the Raiders, especially Pete Carroll, I don't think he's thinking we're going to make the playoffs and win one playoff game and that's considered a success. I don't think Pete Carroll cares about that. I know Raider fans might be happy to win one playoff game, but I don't think Pete Carroll cares. I think Pete Carroll looks at it like, hey, we're going to win one, if not multiple, and we're going to eventually win that Super Bowl. I think that's his mindset, which actually has me super excited and fired up for this season, man. I'm excited for this season. I really do think things are going to look really good for the Raiders. Let's just wrap this video up, man. This is some unfortunate. This isn't unfortunate. We're used to this at this point, right? Not knock on Christian Wilkins, but Tashawn Reed put this photo out. It was taken. Kyle Van Noy obviously posted this. He was having Kyle Van Noy was having a charity golf challenge yesterday, which I believe was on Sunday. Was when this happened. May have been Monday. But he essentially took a picture of 2 Raiders defensive linemen. You got Jonah Laulu here, and then of course you got Christian Wilkins right next to him. And of course Christian Wilkins is in that boot once again. Now, the thing with the boot here is the fact that, the Raiders, they've now had OTAs, right? They've had OTAs. They've had mandatory minicamp. So that's kind of happened over the last 6 weeks. Christian Wilkins practiced, I believe, the first couple of days of OTAs. And he hasn't practiced since, I think, in fact, the first 2 or 3 days were the days he practiced. And then he never practiced from that point forward. That was like 5 weeks ago at this point. And he wasn't even at minicamp according to the reports. And now, the first time we've seen Christian Wilkins for like 5 weeks, he's back in that walking boot. You know, it's super concerning, and I know it's one of those things where we've already talked about this 100 times this offseason, but every time I see this damn image or this damn walking boot, it just makes me feel that much more like this truly does suck for the Raiders. You know, it's one thing that we paid this guy a ton of money, but then we expect him to perform, and he's probably not going to play for the Raiders this year. I think it's trending towards him not potentially playing for the Raiders. Something tells me he's going to end up getting surgery. You know, I would think that, hey, if he can't even walk without the walking boot, it's been 6-7 months, maybe even longer. I think he had surgery back in October. If he can't even walk without a walking boot at this point, it's been 8 months since this happened. How's he going to play football in 2 months from now? Right? To me, it's really, really, really unfortunate. I would hope that he just has the surgery today. Like, he should have had the surgery 5 weeks ago, to be honest with you, but worst case scenario, he has that surgery now. Fix the foot, make sure it's 100% healed, and then let's just, you know, hope you're good to go when the playoffs come around. The Raiders will make the playoffs, I think, this year, even if Christian Wilkins is not playing for the Raiders. But that impact he could potentially have when the playoffs come, that's like 5 months away from this point. The potential impact he could have for the Raiders could be absolutely huge. Not only can he fully recover if he has that surgery now, but he can even have like a whole month to work out and kind of get back into football shape before he gets onto the football field. To me, I would hope that he takes care of this as soon as possible. I do hope he's healthy. I hope he gets right. I'm excited for this year, man. I cannot tell you guys. Just earlier today, I was out somewhere and someone recognized me and started talking about the Raiders. And just the excitement that like I have talking to these other guys with the Raiders, and then they tell me the same thing. They're seeing the same exact stuff. The Raiders, best team we've had, right? Stability at quarterback, all these weapons. The coaching staff is a huge upgrade as well. I'm so excited for this year. I cannot tell you guys how excited I am, but I do hope Christian Wilkins gets healthy. I hope the Raiders, generally speaking, stay healthy. Koonce is another one. We could truly have one of the best defensive lines ever if they're fully healthy. Like Koonce and Wilkins and Crosby and Butler. Like, our D-line could be elite, right? But we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. How do you guys feel about the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line, the Christian Wilkins situation, and then even just kind of the respect the Raiders are getting for the offseason that they've kind of had? You guys obviously understand at this point there's not a ton of news that's going to come out. We're about 4 weeks away from the actual training camp, so 4 more weeks, man. We'll get through it. Let me know what you guys think. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.